God decides to distribute money, and if He says, come on, good people, stand in a queue, there are going to be so less people there that everyone is going to get the money. And I am certainly part of that good personalities. So we took a bold decision and said, we'll do it. And God helped us.
Initially we were looking at a larger plot with our own setup. But as you know, it's very difficult to find a suitable one. We did find one, but then that went into some legal issues. And then we were waiting for quite some time, but then this came along, and then since we've designed the building, we said, okay, let's start over here.
I was involved into this building only to the level of zoning and creating circulation diagram. I did not interfere into KALPAK's work thereafter.
So we've always wanted an open office, not too many cubicles and enclosures which restrict the vision. So we've tried to achieve a lot of openness through the planning. I think it's the large windows which gives in a lot of light, and the height is something that we always wanted. So I think the height makes a big difference, because nowadays offices you don't get more than 11 feet, 12 feet, but this had a 14 feet height. And we've not done any false ceiling because we didn't see any sense in reducing the volume. And since Sir is into education, so we said, why not keep everything exposed? That's also part of learning. So yeah, it's all exposed, it's all bare, it's all true. Whatever is there, it's seen. So there is nothing which is hidden. It's all there to see. One of the focus was to use as much natural light as available. So all the main spaces, apart from one space and the central lounge, which is right in the center of the office, does not have direct light. It has borrowed light. Otherwise, most of the areas are abutting to large windows and glazing. In terms of materials, I like a lot of wood. I don't think any material can replace the warmth and the richness of wood. So wood is something that we've used substantially in this office. Another thing is the textured materials on the floor. So as I said, I like to be bare feet in the office. And now the staff also seeing me and feeling the whole thing, quite a few of them try to be bare feet and enjoy the textures that we've used. In terms of style, I don't think it follows any particular style as such. I think it's a fusion of sorts between the traditional, between the modern, even in terms of the materials, the look and feel. So I think it's a good fusion. I think it's the use of bold colors in different spaces. So a lot of people had apprehensions using a very dark grey or a magenta for the whole cabin. So I think, but it's turned out well. So although it's very calm and serene, there are bursts of color, because vibrancy is something that I believe in. A space should be vibrant. It should have its own individuality and identity. And as a firm, we believe that unless everything is detailed out till the last moment, we should not start, because then the output is completely different. If you keep on changing in the process of doing it up, then some things you might land up with some things which are not really what you anticipated. So everything was thought of in detail, right till the wiring lengths were worked out. So I remember one incident when I told the electrical contractor I wanted 83 meters of speaker wire. He said, yeah, I'm sending a 100-meter bundle to your office. I said, no, cut 83 in your office and send it to me. And he was a little surprised. So one of the thoughts while we were planning this is that the space should not work just as our design studio. We've been trying to promote a lot of artists and youngsters who we feel deserve a platform, because sometimes artists, although they are good, they don't have the connect or the interface with the right buyers. Almost everyone coming to this office is an end user for art, maybe at a later stage if not at the right moment. So we also use this as an art gallery to promote a lot of artists. We've had some events recently in the office where I think had about 200 plus or 250 people who come in for the show. So the flow and the circulation has to be suitable for activities like this also. The moment one enters, the flow should be very, very fluid. There shouldn't be regiments and barriers where one has to think, do I enter here, do I not enter here? So yeah, so the central space, which is more or less open, is the circulation space. So there are no passages, corridors in the office, it's all open.
All over the state of Maharashtra, there were hardly 3-4 architecture colleges. And since there were less number of colleges, most of the faculty used to be fairly senior personalities. The fairly senior personalities who have a performance to show to the society, and at that level they were invited. In my case, it was fairly early. I don't know why Sardesai felt like, I don't know. But when he invited me at such early age, without having a great performance to exhibit to the society, I was thrilled. And then I took it as a kind of a recognition, because I was going to be the youngest teacher in that institute. And that recognition made me to take the decision. And in one of the program I said the teacher as a terminology must be removed from architecture, because nobody can teach architecture. Anybody can learn architecture, but nobody can teach architecture.
So I think it's more about identifying what is it that you personally like, or a certain angle or certain perspective of each one's work, and to see the relevance of what your thought process is, and to imbibe whatever learnings we have from all these great masters.
You get from the society, learn to return back to the society, and that is what is really needed in architectural field today, because everyone learns out of the colleges. They use that for making money, but they don't have time to spend to institutions, so that these institutions will create next generation of architects. And why architecture? Everybody who gets from the society should cultivate a habit of giving something back to the society.
Before I started working with her, it's quite recently, I thought I would see a different mom at home and a different one in office, and the only difference now is that she calls me Bhavya here, and I have quite a silly name at home. But the two words that come to my mind when I think about her are just how driven she is, but at the same time how down to earth she is.
I really love this quote by Frank Lloyd Wright, the famous American architect, where he says that doctors can bury their mistakes, but architects need to advise their clients to grow vines if they make a mistake with how they design their buildings. All of us architects, whether they are truly great ones or not so great ones, we all put our buildings out there, for the whole world to see. And these buildings are not simply inhabited from inside the buildings, but they are actually forming the urban fabric. What the whole city is identified by is how your buildings are going to look, the streets that you traverse on. So that's the urban space that we all inhabit, and all our buildings are forming part of that fabric. And the truly great cities of the world, they're all because of their rich urban fabric is why they are special, and that is why we all look up to them. So this is the thing that I would want to contribute positively to this urban fabric of our city. I do have a few buildings that I'm genuinely proud of, and I would like to be remembered for them. But other than that, I would like to be remembered by my clients for the kind of positive environments I've created for them to live in, to work in, and for the integrity with which I've approached my work. So to begin with, this is a tiny plot. It's only 2,700 square feet, and we had to fit in quite a bit into this plot. The selection of the plot took some time because one was it had to fit my pocket, and also it had to be in the right kind of surroundings. It had to have the right orientation, because I believed that the office that I would build for myself would sort of be an embodiment of what I believed in terms of not just the green sustainable architecture, but also in terms of it had to be a reflection of what our firm is all about. It's a solar passive architecture where the sun is the most important feature in our climate, and then you design your building based on how the sun moves in the sky, where it is positioned in what season and all that. So based on that is how you design your building. And I find that if you make your buildings environmentally sustainable, you'll tick off all that you want to do in your building. Like you all must be aware, Pune is located at around 18.36 degrees north latitude, which means we are pretty close to the Tropic of Cancer, which is at 23.5 degrees north. And the sun during peak summer goes only up to the Tropic of Cancer, and it recedes from there. So in Pune, the sun is to the north only for about 1.5 months in the year. It goes to the north. Rest of the times it's all to the southern side of the sky. So in Pune, as you must be also aware, in factories you have something called a north light glazing. All diffuse light you get from the north. So we said that we will try to get our maximum daylight, not the heat, only the light of the sun you get from the north side. And so we were looking for a plot which would be north facing, and we found this plot which is sort of northeast facing, which also gives us the advantage of deriving a lot of very nice light, daylight without the heat coming into the office space. And it being such a small space, that sunlight permeates all the way to the other end of the building also. As you get into the office space, there's a sort of notional gate. It's kept open most of the times. You also have these street dogs coming in, nicely sleeping in some corner. That also happens. We just have this tiny little lily pond that welcomes you into this space, and that especially comes into full life in the summers when you have the north sun coming onto that pond. And there is a veranda kind of a waiting area for clients, and then we have a conference area which is attached to that entrance area itself, so that most people don't have to climb up to the upper floors, and visitors that come in here, the vendors, we're able to meet them at this level itself. So while you enter into this atrium, which has a very lovely textured granite that we found at a local vendor's place. And then we've used this to create a kind of texture and a grooved pattern. And there was this very nice title to a article written by B.V. Doshi again, which had just stuck in my memory for long. Like it was an article I read about 10-12 years ago saying design does matter, and I thought that has to, every day that we enter the office we have to be reminded that what we are doing is not just paper pushing or just drawing some lines and sending it off to site. And every day we have to be reminded of what our basic function is, that we have to make our designs matter. So that's something that we've got engraved on that wall. If you really count the climb that you have to do to reach the top floor, it's about 13, about 35-40 feet is the total climb. But because it's broken up into these little bits and then you're seeing something new at every turn, I presume because of that it doesn't seem such a big laborious climb to go up to the top floor. And then you climb up, so the first level that you reach is the admin level, and then onwards is all the design studio part. So then again you climb up a little bit and then you reach the next level, which is where I basically have my workspace. And I really very much prefer not to have walls enclosing me into a separate space. There are really no secrets that I need to discuss with anybody in the office. Sometimes it's a disadvantage that when you're reprimanding somebody for something is when you wish there were walls for the cabin. But for majority of what work we do, it's a lot easier to not have a cabin at all in the in the conventional sense. So I just have a larger workspace to myself because I'm all the time interacting with somebody or the other. We also have the little nook for ammonia printing, which is a major thing that happens in architects' offices, which is usually accompanied by the smell of ammonia also throughout the office. So that we've put it right on top in a little mezzanine nook. So our office boy is busy with his ammonia printing in his own space there. So like I told you, we also for the first time were working with this new material for us, which was to work with concrete, exposed concrete. And I was genuinely concerned, is it going to become a really drab kind of place that we are creating? And so we have these little accents. We have a little bit of these very Indian colors, like the color of kumkum, which is your nice red, and haldi, yellow. So those kind of colors we have chosen as bright accents, which will actually set off against these very neutral grey walls that we have. And just a little bit of white has been added here and there, and a lot of warm wood has been brought in there. I've always had this great fascination for wood in its rawness, or the beautiful grain of a natural wood. So we were able to source some very good wood from these old vadas, which are unfortunately being demolished, but at least we're able to make good use of that wood. So all the wood that you see in our office, the natural wood for the staircases and so on, are all sourced from old wood, which is why you see this very lovely grain also in the wood. And it also wears with time. There is this wear and tear, but that's again natural and adds to the beauty. Otherwise, all the material palette, I was able to choose what I really wanted to. No client could dictate that I want Italian marble. So there is no very expensive material that's been used. It's all locally available materials. In the workspaces, there is just a little light to, just for light to be there. It's just in the form of almost diyas. So the lighting that we designed is more not so functional but to actually make the space look very different and very dramatic in the night, because unless there's a real deadline, there aren't too many people at night, or there might be a social gathering, or we might be inviting people over to the office, or generally people tend to hang around in the evenings. So lighting really is it actually dramatizes the kind of textures or the colors that we have used in the office. So the granite that we've used throughout for the cladding, that looks something very different with the kind of accented lighting that we have. So the office, I think, reflects all of that it's a very genuine, very, very open, informal space to be in. It hardly pretends to be anything else than what it is. And it's also a fun space to be in. There are no barriers for people, for communication, for information, or no status levels being maintained in the office. So I believe all of that is a reflection of what I am as a person and my organization, the way it has grown. Even my house to some extent is a reflection of our lifestyle or what people we are. And in the studio, of course, it had to be about me as an architect, not only as a person. So it had to be both of these things. At the root, I would say that I am a very, though I seem very serious, I am actually a fun person from inside, and that I think does reflect in the office, in the sense that it's a very, I'm also very informal, and I don't believe in any kind of pretentiousness. We have a greater responsibility towards how our cities look as architects. So from my side, I would think that contributing to how our city looks is very important to me.
My ultimate goal in design would be to really be able to create environment for people which is really something that they can adapt to very easily. We are not very technology oriented. I am not fond of architecture which looks out of place, which looks very technical, which looks as if a space structure has been bought and kept on the ground, etc. You need architecture which blends in, which sits as if it has always been a part of that space. So my goal is to create more and more spaces like that. This bungalow had temporarily been converted into an office for the owners before we shifted into it. Now this is a very interesting part. We had ourselves done that office. So they had temporarily shifted out to stay in another house, and we had converted the bungalow into an office for them. But they were into a totally different profession. They were an engineering firm. And this office had been fragmented into different parts. There were different cubicles. There was his cabin, hers cabin, because there was a husband-wife couple who were managing the show. So there were two cabins for him and for her. And there were so many cubicles, and it was a closed office. It was an office which looked inside rather than looking outside. So when we took over this place, we had an option of shifting in immediately. We could have just shifted in, and we could have said this is what we have done for somebody else, so it could almost adapt to our own requirements. But when we started with the process of shifting into this office, we realized that the environment, what we had done for them, was good only for them. It could not be good for us. So we had to do this. We had to go through this enormous thought process of undoing our own work. When we started working on it, we looked at a few other offices which were done. My friend architect Deepak Gugari had recently done his new office, and that's when we went to visit his office, and we went to a couple of other offices which were designed by architect Girish Doshi as well. So the whole mantra in these two offices was to open out the spaces, and that's exactly what we did. I think the first impression that somebody has when you come to this office is it's very casual. So So what we did was, there was a staircase block in the center. We decided to have the entrance from the staircase block instead of where it originally was. It was in the front of the bungalow. So we converted that original entrance to our conference room, and we shifted the entrance to the central part, which is the staircase. So what happened after doing that was, we could segregate the studio on one side and we could segregate the other executive areas on one side. There are no official cabins inside. We just have one conference and a couple of discussion areas. Me and my wife Anju, we share a cabin. It's like we have our own independent work desk, and we have a central working table on which we discuss design. So it's a very simple layout. You come inside the office, you have the studio on one side with a small reception area. There's a walkout which is covered by trees on all sides, which is an external walkout where that space becomes a visitor lounge. And on the other side of the staircase, you have a small discussion area where you can also use it as a material selection area.
So in the first place, there were two cabins between me and Ashwin to use, and what he did was he broke down the wall in between, and that was the first step towards opening out the place. We also wanted the people who came to work with us to have an open mind, to have a good sort of environment to work, which triggered off their creativity instead of closing them in on working hours and targets and deadlines. And that is how we came up with this. We opened out the space to, it was typically a 2-bedroom kind of a bungalow which had terraces and a basement. We started using these places creatively. We opened them out, gave the indoor-outdoor connection, and that is how our cabin opens out. It's not a cabin, it's sort of a space for us to work, where we work 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, which is more than how much we are at home. And that's how we opened this up for everybody. We opened it out to the studio, we opened it out for ourselves, and now whenever even a client walks in, he is at peace. The first thing that happens to him is a peaceful mind, and which I think is the USP of the place. We have had those small dreams of picking up things from all over the places that we traveled, and then having a place to put them, having the place them to put them in terms that it shows our personalities, it carries forward our thought processes, and that is how we build the studio. So every little thing that is put here is something that we have a sense of belonging to, and that's how the studio has happened. It's not happened in a day. So all these things that we have here have been stored away somewhere, have been sometime put in our house, somebody else's house, and then we have got them back to put them here.
Talking about the materials and the colors, etc., which have been used in this office, we've tried to keep it very simple, as I said. The tiles are simple ceramic tiles which look like stone. We wanted that kind of feel because this was an office which was merging with the outdoors in majority of its spaces. We wanted a natural kind of feel to it, and we have also used colors which blend with the nature. So trees are probably the biggest asset that we have over here, which becomes like a screen for the sound, because our office is very close to the main road, but the trees around our office, it actually acts as a buffer. Number 2 is the space around. Now we have a basement and some seating over there where we interact with students. So the kind of structure that we inherited, that we started working on to convert it into the office, we didn't make any structural changes. It was an old bungalow, but the structure itself gave a lot of possibilities, a lot of openings to try out our ideas. Any architecture, as I told you, which is true to the surroundings, true to the soul of the space, is something that motivates me or something that inspires me to do better.
When I was born, my father started a nursery and it was named Shobha Farm. So my childhood has gone in the nursery, in the plants. And my father, I have seen him work, how he was connected to the plants. So that inspired me to take up landscaping. I went to Singapore to meet landscape designer Franklin Poe. I saw his studio, a huge studio which had greenery all around. So I thought of a studio, big studio like this. First we had a small office, small studio, but when Mayuri came back from US, Mohan also joined us, Mayuri joined us, Gaurav also joined, so it was a full family. Then I started for looking for a big space. There are two types we are doing actually. One is landscaping and interiors, and architecture part also we do whenever required in landscaping. But interior, my husband was into interior, Mayuri selected interior, and only one daughter, so there was nobody in the family to do landscaping. And because I was working for so many years, I wanted somebody to take up landscaping. Then I had a brilliant idea to get Gaurav in it. I got him from, he was in Germany, I got him from there. He's also interested and he picked up very fast. And he is doing all the landscape, he is helping me in landscape.
Basic planning, principal layout of this office is done by me, and then the detailing.
So as you walk in the space, the first thing you notice is the Vitruvian Man, our little ode to Leonardo. But we turned it around, made it into a kind of a watch. And again, like I said, it's more of a out of respect.
When we first walked into the space, we were really attracted to the open space and the double height, and that's when we decided that the look that we wanted would gel perfectly with this space, and we decided to go ahead with it. In the end, it's about how you get your team to love their work, the work ethos, the studio ethos, and that was the main aim, to design an office space which would give you that studio kind of look and that cafe kind of environment, not a very corporate bank kind of a look.
I think the double height terrace space, which is not very common, this really, and we have our conference in the double height terrace.
I think how the greens balance with the materials that we've used in the interiors, and what makes the space very unique and special is the use of nature with the constructed space, and how we've made the entire space very homely.
As you enter this space, you know that there is not this office. I mean the entire complex. It's very polished. It's very, very stylized. It's very just right. We wanted a space which is more experimental, a place where people can get together. I wanted a cross talk happening between the landscape architects and the interior designers and the illumination design, and with this open kind of a layout, it is fostered more, and we get that as always like two brains are better than one brain. As you increase, you have more ideas coming in and you have a better design evolving. So that, I think, is what we wanted to hit here. That's why you see the open spaces, you see there's no partitions there. That is the idea that we had. and industrial is very, again, high ceiling. You know, we, at that point, 3-4 years back, this was just in its nascent stage. So we wanted to experiment, but the challenge was not to go overboard. I think a lot of spaces have an industrial feel, but it's like everything crammed into 1 square foot. You know. We didn't want that. We wanted a nice, calming, but still at the same time a very lively kind of a hands-on DIY kind of a feel to it. So that's where I think the industrial thing came in.
You click industrial style elements and you get chairs and a lot of like light fittings and a lot of elements, switches and things like that online. But 3 years ago, no one was, you know, that trend had not caught up in the market, and we had to design each and every element from the start. So we got in a lot of scrap material like tables and a lot of industrial elements. Then we got my friend who's also an artist. His name is Naitik. He helped us to make all the light fittings, like customize all the light fittings and all the Vitruvian Man, the design head that you see, the motoscope and everything. So he helped us design all these elements, and the rest of the things we were working on. We got a few tables from a friend's place. It was a used table, a work table from an industry. We converted that into a reception table.
The light mural here was a kind of a focal element here. So as you walk through the conference, you can see it in front. And we wanted, again, the industrial style and the industrial theme coming in. So we said, let's play around with that. And we had a lot of fun doing that, actually.
These are all 4 directors' cabins. So we decided all the cabins will be designed by the individual heads. So this is my cabin, then Gaurav's cabin is done by him, Dad's cabin. So every cabin has only one common element, which is this lighting, light fitting, and the rest is all done as per their liking.
A lush greenery inside the office, because inside the cabin the plants are there, otherwise they are usually outside. And this is a backdrop for us, and this saves me from the sun.
So as you see, I've used a lot of M's everywhere. All the things that I've collected through the years, wherever I've traveled and whatever I've picked up, I've all, you know, put it in one place, and this is where I am most of the time, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. So it feels like home, and all the things that I really like, I've, you know, tried and put it up in one corner.
I think it's splashed all over. I think it's a little bit of I like to collect things. I like to travel. I like to read. I love music. So you see a lot of these elements here, and I wanted the table. This table is not connected anywhere. It's free. So you know, my thinking is also that way. I want the space to be versatile. Tomorrow, if I don't want this table, I can just remove it out. I can have this as a small little, you know, conference. So that was the kind of thinking that we had here.
It's like you're in a corporate building, but you're still in touch with the nature outside. So that helped us a lot showcase all our 3 verticals, being landscape, interiors, and lighting. I've like grown up seeing her work hard from she used to ride a M50, and from there to right now where she is, I've seen the entire journey, the hard work. And I remember mom picking me up from school and taking me on sites when she used to actually, you know, work on small bungalow projects, like one corner where they needed a garden space maybe. And I've seen her, you know, put like her 100% in that like 500 square feet area to now like hundreds of acres that she's working on, and balancing home at the same time. That I've learned from her, balancing so many things together.
read his first book on architecture cover to cover at age 12, and then he followed Frank Lloyd Wright at age 12. From that day till today, he's still reading architecture. He's still a student. So I think that is very rare to find. I have not come across even one single person. I think for him, architecture began the day he was born, and I think it will be with him till the day he's dead.
Christopher has been my teacher and mentor for the past 20 years.
Christopher is a master architect and guru in true sense.
Christopher is a guru for me. He is a real game changer, I would say, to make a budding architect to a professional architect like me.
People know him as an architect and teacher, but he is more than that. He is a philosopher.
Christopher, for me, more than a person, he is like a school of thought for me.
I think I'd like to be remembered for making some kind of impact on the aesthetic life of cities in India. That's very difficult because architects work on one single plot with one single client. But over time we start adding to the ambiance of an urban landscape. So I think as an architect you're doing individual works, but if overall at the end of the whole thing I have some impact on how people think about buildings, environment, experience of people in space, I think I would like to be remembered for that. So we want people to realize when they're entering, right from the entrance to the first door, you're entering a sacred space. So the first thing you enter is an area which by the municipal corporation was a setback of 6 meters, but we turned it into a promenade. So along this promenade you have lotus pools, you have prayer wheels, you have artwork, statues, etc. So immediately you get a clue that this is not a regular house, or it's not an office building or a hospital, but it's something different. And you get an idea that there's a link between art and architecture, there's a link between aesthetics and your movement through space. And then you come to the main portal, I could call it Mahadwar. Now that portal is a very Indian signifier. It's always used to be there, and right from palaces to small houses, you pass through a portal, it means you change your behavior. So everything here is a cue to people, psychological cue, and it's kind of been done like a choreography of a dance, you know, or the planning of a film where you're actually dealing with people's emotions and their thinking. So when they come into the central space, generally people, if you watch them up here, you watch the person coming the first time, they start looking around, and they get a cue that the Shiva statue is an alignment, and it's a kind of a sacred line, because on one side there's a house, you know, you could say a Ram, and on the other side there's the office, you could say Kam. No? So that sort of sacred line divides the space in a kind of a mystical way into two different worlds, and so generally people can see the door open and come into the studio. So it's actually a sequence of spaces where we're trying to build up people's mentality, their psychology, to start thinking about the life of aesthetics, the life of functionality mixed with aesthetics. And of course from there on the whole experience is sort of a planned one. Even when you come up the stairs you'll see pictures of famous architects, people who created the modern movement of architecture. Maybe I must have known half of them. That's one of the fortunate things about my life. I knew many of the great architects of the 20th century, studied under some of them. And so even as you're coming up the stairs, it tells young architects and even clients or people coming here that there's something called a Gharana in architecture, and that I'm part of that Gharana, and that my values really grew out of maybe 100 years of people working in the what is called the modern movement of architecture. Creative signature, that's a very interesting question. You sort of imagine that people would look at a building and it would be like listening to a symphony orchestra, and they would recognize who the composer was by the music. I like to think that my buildings are very Indian. They all have courtyards and brahmastans. We try to have an eastern entrance. We try to separate. We always like to have a place where the public can come. So part of the signature would be that the buildings would be Indian in their own way, but on the other hand they have to be modern and in a sense speak to a global society. So when we did something like Suzlon on One Earth, my client said just do two things. Make something global high-tech, but when people walk in, they should know they're in India. So to me, that would hopefully be my signature, that my buildings would be would have some global principles, but when you walk in, you feel you're in India. And I think there are some principles like human scale, trying to express materiality and bringing nature into buildings. Even an urban courtyard like this is full of plants now. In multifunctional spaces, we have an art gallery here, we have a house, we have 4 guest bedrooms. So many things can happen here. Lectures, there's even on the top floor a small gymnasium and a swimming pool. So everything from recreation to art appreciation to public functions to a house to so many guests take place in Indie House. I think yes, I always had a clear image of a studio of around 30-40 people max. I prefer 25 to 30. I worked in studios from the time I was a teenager, late teenager you would say. Like in Cert's studio we did have about 60 people and we were doing large projects in Boston University, Harvard University campus work and other works in Europe now. So I always thought of a studio about like the studio I have because I need to know every person in the studio. I need to know about their family, I need to know about their personal interests, their lifestyle, so we can click as a group. So, and I always imagined a studio which was a little high-tech, though when I started my career we didn't have any computers, any digital software. We did all the drawings by hand, and then we gradually morphed into a high-tech kind of studio. But I actually brought one of the first computers in Pune, I think 1985, I brought a Hewlett-Packard, and myself and a colleague, Nikita Oak, did some of the first buildings in Maharashtra. They were done on a very primitive software, I would say. But so, and then later we brought in more and more computers. See, the only asset which one needs in a studio is people. If you don't have the right people, it's like having an orchestra and everybody's playing off key. So having a studio is not just having a bunch of people sitting working by themselves at desks. It's having the equivalent of a chorus in music or an orchestra where everybody has to be in harmony, they have to be in tune, and they have to work as an integrated team. So my role is really more like a conductor of an orchestra. The real great people are those people playing the violins and the pianos and whatnot. So the great thing about my studio is the people, and there's nothing else. You know, you can buy software anywhere, you can buy computers anywhere, anybody can set up a studio, but it's the people.
Pune, although it raves about being like the Oxford of the East, it's damn good at like the plays, Marathi plays are there, there's a lot of music, but when you look at really like the visual arts, somewhere it's challenged. As a city, it doesn't have much of visual arts happening. That's when the idea of India House Art Gallery came about. And then since we had this beautiful space created down, it was very large, it was meant for exhibitions, so we converted that into a gallery. When we did convert the gallery, we had a very clear notion that we are going to only exhibit paintings or artworks of highest quality. Not necessarily they have to be like named artists, but the skill must be the highest. So India House supports that kind of culture. We have book releases, we have book talks, we have poetry readings, we have like drama, we have like, you know, talks, films, all sorts of things happen over here. And when this was built, that was kept in mind that we have to create a cultural center. And it's just not an architectural studio, it's architecture also happens over here. Primarily, it's a cultural center.
I think it's very important that an architect have partnership with people who have different interests. No? So if I were working on my own, I wouldn't have time to do an art gallery or even to probably do this shoot. But I have a partner who gels with me, and we work very well together. So I think that our studio is a joint creation. It's not my creation. It's a joint creation with RAMPRASAD. And then there are people in the studio who have been with us for 20 years. Darius Choksi and Rahul Sate, and then Shivaji Karakar, and many, many more people who've been part of the studio for really a long time. And I think it's those people who really create the studio, not really me.